Before Osiris ruled the afterlife, before the mighty pyramids reached for the heavens, there was one who came first. A god who walked in silence, whose eyes glowed from the shadows of the tomb. He did not seek worship or fame. He did not sit upon a golden throne. He stood watch, eternal, unmoving, at the threshold between life and death. His name was Anubis, the dark guardian of the dead. He guided kings and beggars alike. He touched every soul that crossed from this world into the next. He weighed their hearts, he guarded their rest, and he kept the secrets of eternity locked behind his gaze. Long before the underworld had a ruler, long before Osiris claimed his throne, Anubis was there, silent, loyal, and feared by all who drew their last breath. For when the body turned cold and the spirit began its journey, it was Anubis who appeared in the darkness, not as an enemy, but as a guide. He was the jackal of the desert, the shadow by the tomb, the one who never sleeps. But who really was Anubis? A god of death or the savior of souls? In the earliest dawn of time, when gods and mortals still shared the earth, a whisper rose from the desert winds, a whisper of a child born in shadow. His birth was a mystery even to the gods. Some say he was the secret son of Osiris, the lord of life, and Nephthys, the goddess of twilight. A child born not of light, nor of darkness, but of both. Others claim he was born from the divine breath of Ra, the sun god, created from the union of flame and night, destined to watch over the boundary between the living and the dead. But no matter which story you believe, one truth remains. From the moment he opened his eyes, his gaze was fixed not upon the heavens, but upon the horizon, where the sun died each evening, and the souls of men vanished into the sands. They called him Inpu, he who is upon his mountain. For he stood high above the necropolis, watching the silent cities of the dead. In the desolate dunes where only jackals roamed, he found his form. The people feared these wild creatures, scavengers that prowled the burial grounds after dusk. They dug near tombs, sniffed the scent of the departed, and vanished into the night. But the Egyptians did not see cruelty in this. They saw guardianship. They saw the presence of a god who watched over the dead, protecting them from desecration. And so the jackal became sacred. Its sleek black fur symbolized the fertile soil of the Nile, the color of rebirth and eternity. Its golden eyes mirrored the light of the stars, the same stars that guided the souls of men. Anubis became the embodiment of both, the eternal night and the promise of life beyond it. As centuries passed, temples rose in his honor at the edge of the desert. Priests carved his image into the walls, a man with the head of a jackal, holding the crook and flail of power. They prayed to him not out of fear, but out of respect. For every Egyptian knew, when their final breath left their body, it would be Anubis who would come, not to judge, not to harm, but to guide them safely, silently, to the land beyond. He was the first god of the afterlife, the first to open the gates of death. And even when greater gods rose after him, his presence endured, ancient, eternal, unshaken by time. For Anubis was not born of worship, he was born of duty. And duty, in the eyes of the gods, never dies. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was a continuation, a journey from one realm into another. They believed that life was a sacred cycle, like the sun rising and setting over the Nile. Each morning, Ra was born again. Each night, he descended into darkness, not to die, but to travel through the underworld. And like Ra, every soul was destined to rise again if the body could endure. This belief gave birth to one of the most sacred rituals in all of human history, the preparation of the dead. When a man or woman passed from this world, their family did not mourn with despair. They prepared. They summoned the priests of Anubis, guardians of the embalming house, to begin the passage from flesh to eternity. Inside a chamber, lit only by flickering oil lamps, the air heavy with incense, the priests gathered. Their linen robes whispered softly as they moved. Upon their faces, they wore the black mask of the jackal, the sacred face of Anubis himself. To the Egyptians, this act was more than ceremony. It was transformation. They believed that in that moment, the priest ceased to be human. He became Anubis. And that is why they said, the embalmer is the god himself. It was Anubis who cleansed the body with water drawn from the Nile. Anubis who anointed the skin with oil and perfume. Anubis who opened the body to remove what must decay and preserved what must remain. Each movement was ritual, each breath was prayer. The body was not a corpse, it was a temple. And within it, the soul still lingered, watching, waiting for rebirth. They believed that the soul, called the Ka, needed its body to recognize itself. If the body was destroyed, the Ka would be lost, wandering forever in the dark. So the Egyptians worked to preserve it with perfect devotion. Organs were placed in sacred jars, each guarded by a protective spirit. The body was wrapped in fine linen, layer upon layer, each inscribed with protective spells. And as the final bandage was sealed, the priest whispered the ancient words, "May your body be eternal. May your heart be light. May Anubis lead you into the field of reeds." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the scent of resin and the glow of lamplight, the Egyptians saw not death, but hope. A bridge to eternity, guarded by the one who knew its every path. To them, Anubis was not a god of mourning. He was the keeper of transformation. He guided the body through the hands of the living and the soul through the gates of the dead. For in Egypt, death was sacred. It was the proof that life itself was divine. When the body was sealed within its tomb and the final prayers were spoken, the journey of the soul had only just begun. The ancient Egyptians believed that death opened a great passage, a path through the underworld known as the Duat. It was a place both beautiful and terrifying, filled with lakes of fire, rivers of darkness, and gates guarded by monstrous beings. Every soul would have to travel through this shadowed realm to reach paradise, but none could do it alone. And so, when the spirit awoke in the afterlife, there was always a figure waiting, tall, silent, and cloaked in darkness. It was Anubis, the guide of souls. He would take the hand of the departed and lead them through the twisting corridors of the Duat. No demon dared touch a soul under his protection, for Anubis was the first and final guardian, the one who walked freely between both worlds. At the end of the journey stood the Hall of Ma'at, the the chamber of truth. Here, every soul would face the moment it had been preparing for since birth, the weighing of the heart. In that sacred hall, light glowed like sunlight beneath the water. 42 divine judges sat in silence. At the center stood Anubis, his black form radiant in the golden light. Before him was the great scale, one side for the heart, the other for the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of order and truth. The heart was not a symbol. It was the very essence of a person. Their thoughts, their actions, their hidden motives. The Egyptians believed the heart recorded everything a person had done in life, every kindness, every cruelty, every secret desire. Anubis would lift the heart gently and place it upon the scales. In the other pan, he placed the pure white feather, light, perfect, unchanging. Then he watched, and the universe itself waited. If the heart was pure, if the soul had lived in harmony with truth, the scales would balance. The person was declared Ma'akeru, true of voice, and Anubis would smile. The soul would then be led before Osiris to dwell forever in the field of reeds, a paradise beyond pain and time. But if the heart was heavy, burdened by deceit, greed, or violence, the scales would tip. Anubis would turn his gaze away, and from the shadows a creature would rise, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus. Ammit, the devourer of souls. With a single snap of her jaws, the heart would be destroyed, and with it, the soul, erased from existence, forgotten by gods and men alike. To the Egyptians, this was the ultimate fate to fear. Not eternal torment, but nothingness. The loss of one's name, one's memory, one's place in eternity. That is why they prayed, why they lived with balance and truth, because they knew one day their hearts would be weighed, and only Anubis would stand beside them, not to accuse, not to forgive, but to reveal the truth that lived within. For Anubis was not a god of punishment. He was the measure of the soul, the balance between good and evil, light and shadow, chaos and order. He did not speak. He did not intervene. He simply weighed what was. To the Egyptians, this was not fear. It was justice. The greatest justice, pure, eternal, and uncorrupted. And so they lived with the thought that somewhere beyond the mortal world, a black jackal stood watch, waiting for the day when every heart would be placed upon his scales. There was a time when Anubis ruled the shadows alone. Long before Osiris rose as king of the dead, Anubis was the master of the underworld, the first guardian, the first judge, the first protector of souls. He was the one who built the pathways through the Duat. He guided the first of the dead when the earth was still young and the Nile had not yet learned to flood. His word was law in the darkness, and for an age, none challenged him. But then came Osiris, the green god, lord of fertility, of resurrection, and of rebirth. He was not born of the shadows, but of the living earth. He ruled the fields, the harvest, and the rhythm of life itself. And yet, through betrayal and blood, his destiny was forever changed. When Set, the god of chaos, murdered Osiris and scattered his body across Egypt, it was Anubis who gathered the pieces. It was Anubis who mummified the god's remains, who wrapped his limbs in linen, who restored his form with sacred oils and prayers known only to the dead. And when Isis wept over her husband's lifeless body, it was Anubis who stood silently beside her, a shadow between grief and eternity. Through Anubis' hands, Osiris was reborn, not as a god of the living, but as Lord of the afterlife. From that moment, the balance shifted. Anubis, once ruler of the realm of the dead, bowed to the resurrected Osiris. He became the guardian, the judge's assistant, the protector of tombs and souls, still revered, still powerful, but no longer king. Yet there was no rivalry, no war of gods, no jealousy in his gaze. For Anubis understood what few gods ever did, that his role was not to rule, but to protect. To ensure that death remained sacred, not chaotic. To guard the boundary between the living and the dead. And so, under Osiris's reign, Anubis became something even greater. Not a god of dominion, but a god of purpose. He guided souls to Osiris's throne. He watched over the tombs of kings. He ensured the dead were buried with honor and that no spirit wandered lost. In the temples of Thebes and Abydos, priests whispered his name before embalming the dead. They said, "Anubis goes before you. He opens the way." He was no longer the ruler of the underworld, but he was still its gatekeeper, the one who ensured that even gods respected the laws of death. And though Osiris wore the crown, it was Anubis who kept the keys. In every shadowed crypt, his presence lingered. In every funeral procession, his spirit walked. And in every heart that faced judgment, his silent eyes measured the truth. For Anubis had learned the greatest secret of all, that death was not power, it was duty. Death, to the ancient Egyptians, was not the end, but the tomb, the resting place of the body, was sacred ground. It was the bridge between two worlds, and there was one God who watched over it all, Anubis, the eternal guardian of the grave. To disturb the dead was the greatest crime one could commit. It was not just theft, it was an insult to the divine order itself. For in every burial chamber, every coffin, every sealed sarcophagus, Anubis stood invisible, his jackal eyes glowing in the dark. He was the protector of the tombs, the silent sentinel that ensured no living hand violated the peace of the dead. Across Egypt, his image was carved upon walls and amulets, a black jackal crouched above the shrine, ears raised, eyes fixed, waiting. This was not mere decoration, it was a warning. Inscriptions near tomb entrances carried chilling words. "Cursed be he who breaks this seal. The guardian shall find him, and his heart shall be devoured in darkness." To the ancients, these were not empty threats. They believed Anubis himself punished those who desecrated the dead. Archaeologists have uncovered statues of Anubis guarding the doors of royal tombs, sometimes carved of obsidian, sometimes painted pitch black with gold inlay. They faced outward, always toward the intruder, eyes open, teeth bared, waiting for the trespasser who would never return. Even in modern times, strange stories echo through the desert wind. Local diggers speak of the jackal's curse, a curse said to strike anyone who dares to disturb the slumber of the ancients. Men who entered sealed chambers and never came out. Workers who ignored the prayers and laughed at the warnings, only to vanish beneath shifting sand or die within days, struck by fever or madness. In 1905, a British explorer recorded that his torch went out the moment he stepped into a tomb adorned with the likeness of Anubis. He claimed he heard breathing in the darkness, heavy, close, circling him. When he stumbled out, his companions said his hair had turned white overnight. Others tell of footprints, jackal prints, pressed into the dust around freshly broken tomb seals, even when no animal tracks led in or out. Coincidence or warning? To the ancients, there was no doubt. Anubis still guarded the sacred dead. He was not bound by time nor forgotten by the sands. For every tomb, great or small, bore his unseen mark. And perhaps even now, beneath the shifting dunes of Saqqara or the Valley of the Kings, his shadow lingers still, waiting, patient and eternal, for those who would dare to disturb what the gods have hidden. Because in the end, no lock is stronger, no curse more certain than the watchful eyes of Anubis, the guardian of the tombs. In the flickering light of oil lamps, deep within the stone halls of ancient temples, the people of Egypt offered their prayers, not to a god of vengeance, but to a guardian who listened in silence. Anubis was not worshipped with fear, but with reverence. To the Egyptians, death was not darkness, it was transformation. And Anubis, the black jackal, stood as the guide through that sacred change. Each offering placed before his shrine carried meaning. Small figurines of jackals carved from obsidian or basalt, bowls of milk, incense, and honey left at his altars. Priests in linen robes would whisper prayers for protection, for the dead, for the living, and for their journey beyond. In the great necropolises of Memphis and Thebes, blackened altars stood in his honor. Their surfaces polished smooth by centuries of hands, their ashes mixed with the dust of offerings long since gone. To outsiders, his color, deep black, might seem ominous, but to the Egyptians, black was sacred. It was the color of rebirth, of the rich Nile soil that gave life to the land. It was the color of night, where the stars were born. And so, Anubis's dark hue was not a symbol of death, but of renewal. Each year, during the festival of Whippet Rempet, the Egyptian New Year, the people celebrated the cycle of life and death. They lit torches, carried statues of Anubis through the streets, and sang hymns to guide the spirits of the departed safely into the afterlife. They called upon Anubis to bless their homes, their families, and their tombs, to keep the balance between what was seen and what was unseen. For Anubis was a god of duality. To the wicked, he was a terror, the black shadow that waited beyond the veil, the one who weighed the heart and found it heavy. But to the just, he was mercy itself. Gentle, guiding, patient. He did not punish, he protected. He led the worthy through darkness into eternal light. In him, the Egyptians saw the perfect balance between life and death, fear and hope, shadow and dawn. Even now, thousands of years later, his image endures. A jackal standing over a tomb, ears alert, gaze eternal, neither cruel nor kind, but always watching. Because to the ancients, Anubis was not merely a god, he was a promise that no soul would walk the road to eternity alone. Across the sands of Egypt, the name of Anubis was whispered in tombs and temples, the silent guardian who walked between the living and the dead. But beyond Egypt's borders, far from the Nile's fertile banks, other civilizations spoke of their own guardians, spirits and gods who guided souls through the twilight of existence. Though separated by oceans, mountains, and time itself, their stories echo the same truth. humanity has always needed a guide in the dark. In Greece, they called him Hades, the lord of the underworld. He ruled not as a monster, but as a keeper of order, ensuring the dead remained in their rightful place. Like Anubis, he was misunderstood, feared by mortals, yet essential to the balance of life and death. In the frozen realms of the north, the Norse spoke of Hel, the pale goddess who reigned over the land of the dead. Half beautiful, half decayed, she welcomed all who did not die in battle. To the living, she was dread, but to the dead, she was home. Across the sea, in the sacred temples of the Aztecs, stood Mictlantecuhtli, the skeletal god of the underworld, his body adorned with bones, his eyes blazing with fire. He too ruled a vast realm beneath the earth, guiding souls through 9 perilous levels before their final rest. And in the east, within the hymns of the Vedas, the Hindus told of Yama, the first mortal to die, who became the eternal judge of souls. He sat upon a throne beside his twin dogs, guarding the gates between worlds, ensuring that every soul found its destined path. Different names, different lands, but one truth unites them all. The psychopomp, the guide of souls. From the deserts of Egypt to the icy fjords of Scandinavia, from the jungles of Mesoamerica to the plains of India, every culture imagined a figure who stands at the threshold, not to condemn, but to lead. They called them gods, guardians, spirits, but in every form they served the same sacred purpose, to ensure that death was not chaos, but a passage. And among them all, Anubis stands as one of the oldest, the first to weigh the heart, the first to guide the soul, the first to remind humankind that the journey does not end with death. It simply continues under the watchful eyes of a silent protector. Perhaps that is why his image still endures, thousands of years after the last pyramid stone was laid. Because somewhere, deep within the human spirit, we all believe that when the final breath leaves our bodies, we will not walk alone. Someone, or something, will be there, waiting in the dark, to guide us home. There was a time when his name echoed through every necropolis, when the scent of incense rose to the heavens, and every tomb bore his symbol, the black jackal standing guard over eternity. But time is a relentless tide. Empires rise and gods fall. When the Greeks came to Egypt, they called him Hermanubis, a fusion of Hermes and Anubis, the messenger and the guide. Even they recognized his ancient power, his eternal role as the conductor of souls. Yet with the coming of Rome, and later the rise of Christianity, the old gods began to fade into shadow. Temples once filled with prayers grew silent. The priests of Anubis laid down their masks and never returned. His altars were shattered, his name struck from inscriptions, his image condemned as the symbol of a pagan age. To the New World, Anubis became a myth, a memory buried beneath sand and stone. For centuries, his black figure slept in darkness, forgotten beneath the weight of time. But gods like Anubis do not die. They wait. And when the world grew restless again, when humanity once more began to seek meaning in the unknown, his shadow stirred. Through the eyes of archaeologists, through the wonder of explorers uncovering tombs lost for millennia, Anubis rose once more, not as a deity of worship, but as a symbol. Today, his image lives on, painted across movie screens, inked upon the skin of those who crave mystery and protection. He appears in video games, novels, and art, his jackal form unchanged, his aura of darkness eternal. But why? Why does the world still feel his presence after 5,000 years? Perhaps because Anubis represents what we fear most and what we hope for most. He stands for justice beyond mortal reach, for order in the face of chaos, for protection when all light fades. He is not evil, though his form is dark. He is not cruel, though he guards the gates of death. He is balance, the keeper of truth when all else falls away. And in a world that still fears death, Anubis remains the quiet promise that death itself is not the end, but a passage watched over by something ancient, something patient, something just. The temples may have crumbled, the worship may have faded, but the legend endures, in art, in memory, in the human soul. Because some gods are not forgotten, they are simply waiting, in the dark, for the world to remember their name once more. Anubis, the dark guardian of the dead.
The story of Anubis is not merely about death. It is about the soul, about the invisible truth that lives within every human heart. For beyond the myths and the temples, beyond the mummies and the tombs, Anubis endures, not as a god of the ancient world, but as a symbol of something far greater. He is the voice of conscience, the unseen guardian who weighs our hearts long before we die. The Egyptians believed that in the end, every action, every word, every thought and secret desire would be placed upon the scales of eternity. And perhaps, in a way, they were right. For every choice we make leaves its mark upon the soul. Every kindness lightens the heart. Every cruelty weighs it down. And though we no longer stand before Anubis's golden scales, we still feel their presence deep within, whenever we ask ourselves if we have lived in truth. The ancients prayed not only for a safe journey through the underworld, but for a pure heart, one light enough to rise. From the Book of the Dead, their voices still whisper through time. O Anubis, guardian of the silent place, may you hold my heart steady upon your scales. Let me not be found wanting. Let my soul be as light as Ma'at's feather. They believed that goodness was not forgotten, that even in death the just would find peace. And so their prayers became a promise that no matter how dark the road ahead, a guide would walk beside them. Tonight, if you listen to the desert wind, you may still hear the echo of those ancient prayers, the soft murmur of eternity breathing through sand and stone. For Anubis has never truly vanished. He lives within us as the quiet reminder that truth, justice, and compassion are the real keys to immortality. The Egyptians called him the guardian of the dead, but in truth, he has always been the keeper of the living heart. And perhaps that is his greatest legacy. that across 5,000 years, we still look to the darkness and believe that somewhere within it, there is a light, a guide, a guardian, who waits to lead every soul home.
In the stillness of eternity, the sands whisper. The stars shimmer above the sleeping desert. The Nile glows beneath the moon, and the tombs lie silent, their guardians eternal. For 5,000 years, the name of Anubis has endured. He does not speak. He does not seek worship. He simply waits, as he always has, between one world and the next. To the Egyptians, death was not the end. It was a journey, a passage through darkness toward the light of truth. And on that journey, one God stood watch, silent, eternal, unyielding. The dark guardian of the dead, Anubis. He weighs not only the hearts of the dead, but the hearts of all who live. For in every breath, every act, we place our own souls upon the scales. And when the last breath falls away, perhaps somewhere beyond the veil, a black figure waits in the shadows, patient, calm, ready to lead us home.